Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties, joined by our esteemed legislative crew today, Deena, Bosworth, Samantha Gibson, Madeline, Fata. Happy County Government Month of April, everyone. Big deal around here. And also, this is being recorded on the eclipse day. So happy solar eclipse, I believe, right? All right.
A lively bunch today.
Yeah, I can tell. It's throwing these solar eclipses throwing everyone off. It must be getting dark out right now or something because getting sleepy.
Well, it's also the Monday after spring break, couple of weeks in the legislature, and
Yeah,
getting into the groove of things.
Mentally back in it, mentally focused. So let's start off. Let's talk a little hotel motel tax that was signed by the governor. Deena, tell us a little bit about that bill and what it does and how does it affect counties?
Yeah, it's House Bill 5048, and it finally, after months of sitting, ready to go to the governor, it went to the governor and she signed it last week. We did an article on it in our legislative update, so you can look at that too. But basically what it does is allow a certain number of counties to put on the ballot a measure that would allow them to increase the excise tax that they charge on temporary lodging. Now, primarily this was being spurred on by Kent County. And so as part of the legislation that allows them to increase the excise tax on these temporary lodgings, so hotel motels, and I think Kent County has a deal with that they've worked out with Airbnb, where they also pay some of that excise tax to them. That's going to allow them to increase funds. But Kent County was looking at a sports complex and an aquarium. And so part of the legislation allowed for the expenditure of these excise tax dollars on those two other kinds of facilities. So to help them raise money for more of their economic development, they can charge, more on a bed tax to help them pay for it. As that bill was going through the process, though, this is for all my other counties out there, my northern counties, that I need you to understand, we really tried to get this to apply to all counties across the state. Because I know that, several other counties who are not eligible for this would like to raise money for economic development. They'd also like to raise money for additional public safety to respond to the influx of tourists that come in their counties. But because that was met with quite a bit of resistance from certain organizations that collect their own bed tax, we were not able to actually incorporate that into this bill without stumping it up for a while. And I know Kent County was looking at a deadline that they needed to get this on the ballot so they can raise enough funds to do their economic development projects. So great news for them. Great news for the other 6 or 7 counties that can also put this on the ballot. So, I mean, at the end of the day, very supportive of it, very happy for them, but we'll continue the fight on getting it to all counties to be able to have that revenue.
Yeah, and great news because it's teed up now, right? It's the precedent set. There's the knowledge is out there that this is a way that counties can use dollars for economic development should they need it. And, the proof is in the pudding over there in Kent. So hopefully the legislature recognizes that as we look at, potentially doing this in the rest of the counties across the state. Moving on, Sam, let's talk a little trial court funding. It's not that we haven't done it before, or some might think it nauseum at this point, but it's still something that's important. As this sunset date approaches, what's the latest update on the trial court funding legislation?
So at this time, fortunately, we're still held up on trial court funding legislation in the House. There's 2 bills, just as a reminder for everyone. There's the sunset extension, because that deadline for the authority for courts to collect fees from criminal defendants expires on May 1. And then there's a bill that's tie-barred to it, meaning they cannot move separately. They must stay together. That bill requires the state court administrator's office to do data collection on court costs, revenue, etc., and then return that to the legislature in May of 2026. Now, given the split House, the bills have fallen victim to split House negotiations, And crunch time, May 1's coming quickly. So as Deena mentioned, the legislature's been on spring break for the last few weeks. We just got an agenda for House session tomorrow. There's no attendance and no voting. So I don't anticipate these bills getting a vote this week. What's becoming increasingly likely and what I think will end up happening is when the 2 vacant House seats are filled after those special elections, April 16th, maybe. So let's say the April 23rd or 24th, maybe the House will vote the bills out then. The Senate's going to have a hearing on some Senate versions of those bills on the 18th. So whenever the House bills get over there, they can just get sent right to the Senate floor, voted out, and hopefully to the governor's desk before May 1. I don't know how likely that is though, so we probably will be looking at a week or so after May 1 for implementation of the new sunset.
Yeah, which means a lack of potential funding there, or a actual lack of funding, because those fees will not be able to be charged. And I believe Scale sent a memo out last week, correct?
Yes, so if May 1 comes and goes without the extension of the sunset, we're looking at about $1 million a week of a funding gap from courts not being able to impose those fines and fees. So SCAO this past Friday sent a memo out to courts saying, hey, just so you know, this is coming up, make a plan with your funding units, moving forward. Our perspective is if the legislature cannot come to a consensus on this before May 1, when there's been ample time to figure this out and ensure that courts can collect these fees and operational costs, then the state should be appropriating adequate funding back out to funding units and courts to make up for that gap that was created.
Which has happened before, correct? We've been down this path before.
Yes, October of 2022 was the last sunset. It was signed a week or so later. So yeah, that was done a few years ago. Different set of circumstances though, right? I mean, last time around, there was no political nature surrounding it. It was just a lack of session days and a shortened timeline. This time around, we're on a shortened timeline, but there's other factors at play. I don't see that holding up the appropriations, but it's worth considering that there's a different dynamic here. So I encourage all of you to use the P2A on the MAC website, contact both your House reps and your senators, let them know what your county stands to lose if trial court funding authority passes on May 1.
Yeah, and we know it's about $1 million a week, that, these fees cost counties that have to be covered, whether it's by counties or the state. And that's where the state funding or appropriation will hopefully come in. All right, and then finally, let's close things out today since they have been on legislative spring break for the past couple weeks. Not a lot has gone on the past few weeks. Hopefully things will pick up. Of course, we have our MAC conference coming up at the end of this month. The registration's still open, April 29th through 5/1. We'll have our legislative reception at the conference. That's often well attended. Let's talk the spring session. Any one of you guys can chime in on this. What are we looking at as spring session between now and, let's say, June, July? What are we hearing? We got a budget to do still. What's going on?
Well, I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's an election year. So we know that they're going to want to get out of here at least the House is going to want to get out of here for the majority of the summer so they can go back and meet with their constituents and try and regain their seats. So we don't expect too many session days, past early June. As far as prior to that, the House and this is still stuck at 54-54. There's no clear majority vote to get bills off the floor. And so we're hearing not very many session days until after the special election to fill those 2 vacant seats. Now, those elections should are taking place next week. But it's going to take a little while for those votes to be certified. No less than 8 days is what I was told. So after that, then the House can swear in the 2 new members who are likely to be Democrats. Then the Democrats will have a clear majority again, and I think they'll start kicking some legislation out. But prior to that, I don't see a whole heck of a lot of activity.
Right, but we are hearing some movement on budget committees, correct? And some potential votes coming.
Yeah, they're gonna hold still committee meetings, so they'll have budget committee meetings. They're gonna try and get their budgets out of each respective chamber, I think before the end of April, so that the other chamber has time to work on them as well and send them back. We're used to this process. And then after the May revenue estimating conference, which I wish I knew the date, I don't know right now, they'll get real targets. Hopefully they'll, the quadrant will get together, set real targets and get the budget done by the beginning of June.
And then the committees will come together, finalize everything, get it to the governor and move
Mhm.
things along. I agree. I think the idea being get it done quickly, possibly by the Detroit Chamber Conference, which is up on Mackinac, or sign a budget maybe up there, the pomp and circumstance for that. And then it's election time, right?
And it's crazy season.
And election time for our county commissioners who will be running now for
4 years, 4
Yep.
years. Yay.
long time coming for that. Anything else I didn't cover that anyone wants to touch on? All right, again, conferences registration's open. Please pop over on our website and sign up for that and get your room reserved. A great conference lineup, a lot of great speakers. Admiral Cressy's coming in from Washington, a great speaker, very knowledgeable on George Washington and his leadership style and talking about that. So with that, if no one has anything else, have a great week, a great county government month, and enjoy the eclipse.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.